Okay, today with me, I have a special guest. He is a financial guru. The man knows his numbers. And again, I have the honor and pleasure of having as my guest today, I have Mr. Mavery Davis. Again, he is a financial guru, again, expert, tax guy. Mavery, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. How you doing, Ray?
I'm doing fine, man. I'm doing fine, man. Hey, thank you for coming on my show. Again, appreciate this right here. And again, we're going to talk numbers and we're going to talk some issues as well as tax information also. Um, Before I go into my first question, Mavery, tell the viewers something about you.
Okay. Well, I think the most important thing to know about me is that I'm very passionate about what I do, that I care about the community, and that, that I'm here. Ultimately, I'm here to help. So I think that's the I think that's what people need to know about me.
Now, when did you go to school?
I went to school. I graduated from West Virginia State University in 2007, but I was a transfer actually from a junior college in College of the Canyons in California, and then I transferred here to UC, played a season of football there. And then I eventually transferred to state, and I'm a yellow jacket now and graduated in '07.
HBCU. Okay, all right, all right, all
Yeah,
right.
yep.
Let's get into the meat of this right here. My first question to you: what are the two most important things about taxes?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and the very first thing that folks should know about taxes is that they need to have a very clear understanding of their tax obligations, both filing and payment. That's number one. So that's actually two separate processes. Um, and so number one is just understanding that clearly. And obviously number two is assuring full and proper payment. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. Understand what your obligations are and make sure that they are taken care of properly.
Going back and forth, between taxes and as far as things that's what was going on in today's society with um, wealth. Um, I saw a clip about the racial wealth gap here in the nation,
Mm-hmm.
and it showed where um, white gap the white wealth was $171,000, 171,
Mm-hmm.
and for black families it was just $17,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we know about the wealth gap. Is there a tax code that contributes to that?
I mean that's a very important question, and to be honest, it really drives the heart of that I do, is the racial wealth gap. So when you see me out in the community teaching people, young kids, about financial literacy, it's because I understand that we got to learn that stuff at an early age, because that's one of the ways to start attacking the racial wealth gap, is just to give people some practical skills that a lot of us didn't have. But kind of getting off tangent, but so to you, back to the tax code, right? So actually, a vast majority of the U.S. tax code contributes to the racial wealth gap in America. Um, there's a really informative study by the Tax Policy Center, that's a collaboration between, it's a collaborative research effort between the Urban Institute and the Brookings Institution. But the report is just really good, right? So in general, people with higher incomes pay a larger share of their income in taxes than those with lower incomes, right? And this can help close the racial income gaps, right? Now that's in a perfect world, like, but there are some, and many would argue, lots of tax policies that can exacerbate the income and wealth inequities stemming from longstanding discrimination in areas such as housing, education, employment. So this report I'm referring to uses the individual income tax return, the Form 1040, to kind of guide people through all the disparities, racial disparities. So I actually want to explore that report a little bit. Explore how the federal income tax code interacts with existing racial inequities by focusing on like 3 areas of the 1040. So we're going to look at marital status, capital gains, dividends, and interest, and pass-through businesses, or like a lot of people like to say, I filed my LLC, right? So,
All right.
So those are all 3 areas that you will find on the individual tax return, and so we're going to kind of explore those, like the study explore those. So where you find marital status at on your 1040, that's going to be your filing status. So, and again, I'm reading from this report from the Urban Institute. So, tax liabilities depend on the taxpayer's filing status, meaning whether a taxpayer is married or single, and if single, whether he or she lives with children or other dependents. So, single taxpayers with children and other dependents are considered heads of households. Now, here's where it gets meaty, right? So, couples who marry, if they're dual earners, normally one is earning more than others, and normally what that leads to is something which is called like a marriage bonus, right? So, so under current law, there are many more couples that receive marriage bonuses than incur penalties from filing jointly. Now, here's where the disparities come in at. In 2019, just over half of all white households were married couples, compared with 60% of Asian households, 48% of Hispanic households, and 27% of Black households. So Black households had the largest shares of single heads of household, and of people living alone, right? So the overall marriage rate in America has declined over the past 50 years, but especially so for Black households. Marriage rates are typically higher for higher income couples, and people of color are likelier to cite financial instability as a major reason for not getting married. So just within your filing status, there's all these tax benefits that you get just for being married, but through history, we know what happened to the Black household and to Black families and stuff. And so we're still feeling the effects of that today, right? You see the numbers, less of us are married. So therefore, we're not benefiting from the tax code as much as we should, just for the simple fact that so many Black families have been torn up for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now,
Go
and,
ahead.
and why I say that, again, there's always, I hate to say it like this, the devil's in the details.
Right.
And I've heard the stories. I've heard stories, though, both from Black folks and white folks. And so, and that's why I asked that question. Okay, not to try to stoke any people feelings or anything like that, but I'm just asking questions.
No, and it's not, like that, and that's why we use numbers, right? Like the numbers. Now we can go into why all of that stuff happened, right? If we want to go back into American history and all of that stuff. But the facts are the facts. There are a lot less black married couples that are benefiting from the tax code, right? And the tax code is set up uh, largely to benefit married couples, and that's just one area where we're already behind the eight ball. So that's something that stems again from long-standing, racial issues in this country, right? Mm-hmm. So that and again is it's also institutionalized through the tax code, right? They didn't go switch the tax code up to make it more beneficial for single people. It just is what it is, right?
Besides that, besides about the wealth gap, are there any other racial disparities in the income tax system?
Yeah. So again, you're gonna start seeing a similar vein, right? So let's look at capital gains, dividends, and interest, right? So where you find capital gains at on your 1040, that would be line 2B, taxable interest, lines 3A, qualified dividends, or line 3B, qualified or ordinary dividends, and line 6, capital gains and loss, right? So for people that don't understand what capital gains are profits from the sales of capital assets such as shares of stock or investments in businesses or land. Capital gains are taxed only when realized, right? So when the underlying asset is sold. So effectively, that's a way to like defer taxes, right? Unlike taxes on wages, which are generally withheld as the income is earned, so we paying our taxes through the wages, right? So the preferential tax treatment of capital gains contributes to growing disparity in wealth between white families and black families and Hispanic families. And people with access to assets can benefit from preferential rates on assets held for more than a year. They can also benefit from what is called a step-up in basis provision, which effectively exempts income tax on unrealized gains on assets held until death. So then there's other benefits for dividends, right? So these provisions are going to cost the federal government over $700 billion. Between that's seven with a B, $700 billion. People are going to be benefiting from the tax system between 2019 and 2022. So white families hold almost every type of financial and non-financial asset at higher rates than others. Disparities in the value of corporate stocks and business equity, which generate a large share of total net capital gains, are even wider. So in 2016, white families' holdings were 3 to 4 times higher in the median value than those of Black or Hispanic families. So according to the Tax Policy Center estimates, the top 1% of taxpayers by income who are disproportionately less likely to be, you guessed it, in households of color, will receive over 75% of the total benefits from the preferential treatment of these capital gains. So 700, they're going to receive 75% of that $700 billion in benefits and everything that are going to come out just from that portion of the tax code, right? So like it's all through the tax code. Like it's set up for things that we just largely been locked out of having, right? We don't own as many assets as everybody else because our stuff was either burned down or taken from us, or we just don't have the same level of assets as others in the country, and largely that's due to race.
In general, if there's one, what is the biggest mistake Americans make on their taxes?
In general, the biggest mistake that Americans make on their taxes is really not understanding their full obligation. I'll use an example to demonstrate that. for example, here in West Virginia, there is something called the sales and use tax, right? So depending on in every business that registers in the state, they're going to get these forms, every month or every 3 months. The state's going to send these forms um, to report and or pay your sales tax, right? Well, a lot of folks that I see don't really understand their obligation to file that return, whether or not they have any obligation, right? They may not have had any sales, or they may have sales that are not subject to sales tax. For example, like myself, if you provide a service, right, not non-tangible items, you still have to file that report, but you have to take an exemption so that you don't have to pay any sales tax on that income. The point is, you still have to file those reports, even though that there may or may not be a payment attached to it. So I've seen, especially with construction companies out here, construction companies, some things that they do are subject to sales tax, and some things that they do are not subject to sales tax, right? So I once worked with a construction company who didn't recognize this obligation to file these returns, and they didn't do really well the first few years, but just this 1 year they happened to do well, and all of that stuff was activity that was not subject to sales tax. It was a when you do an improvement on something where it's going to make the asset last longer, right? They don't have to pay sales tax on that. But they never filed these returns. So what the state did was assess them on going back 3 or 4 years, assess them on and just implied income and attach sales tax to it, and then they ultimately ended up owing, several $1,000s, up above $50,000 in sales tax, just because of an assessment. And all they would have had to do was file the returns, take the proper exemptions, and all that stuff at the time when they were due, and then they would have never gotten into the hot water of having to prove stuff that it was harder to prove more years out. So I use that long story to say, understand your full tax obligation and make sure that you're doing the proper things to take care of it. Like a lot of businesses, they end up paying a penalty at the end of the year, an underpayment penalty, because most people don't pay their income taxes, especially when they're small business owners. They're supposed to pay them quarterly, right? Most people wait to the end of the year. You're actually supposed to be making estimated tax quarterly estimated tax payment. And a lot of people don't do that. So either way, either they're getting hit with a penalty, or they're paying a lump sum of money in taxes when they at one time when they should have been managing that obligation throughout the year.
Okay. Now you're sitting down. Go ahead and adjust yourself. Maybe you want to stand up and take a little stretch, because we're going to shift gears here. It's going to get a little sticky here for you. Okay.
Okay.
Ready? Take a little drink if you want to.
Okay.
Oh, again, I have Mavery Davis, CPA, financial guru. He is my guest on Our Voices. We're going to talk some STEMI talk. That stimulus.
The STEMI talk. Oh,
the
yeah.
STEMI talk, yes. That's what my buddy Woody calls it, the STEMI. Mavery, $1,400. $1,400 is going to the majority of the Americans here. Well, to folks that's making under $75,000.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, one, I'm sure we have to pay this back at some point in time. The public will have to pay it back. Does the public have to claim that on their taxes come next year?
To my knowledge, no. This is not meant to be included as income at any point. As far as I know right now, it hasn't been handled that way in the past. None of the previous stimulus that has been issued is reportable currently. So, I don't see that being an issue going forward.
Okay. Another question for you. $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big debate going on right now as far as should the nation go up to $15 an hour as far as the minimum wage?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I got strong opinions about that.
Are you for it or are you against it? And
I'm
why?
1,000,000,000% for it. And to be honest, $15 an hour, we ain't asking for enough. Um, Now, I have to go find a report to prove it, but the minimum wage should, if it were keeping up with inflation over the last 50, 60 years, the minimum wage, uh, based on the production gains that the U.S. has been showing, should actually be up above $21 an hour or more. Like, so this is a huge issue, and one of the biggest contributors to the wage gap actually, or the wealth gap actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should actually be supporting the $15 an hour minimum wage.
Now, let me jump in real quick. Okay,
Go ahead.
this is what people are saying. Business owners, they can't afford to pay their employees $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That's the notion.
No,
So
I get that. I get that. And so I'm going to push back on that and say, one, and this is not to disparage any small business owner or anybody out there, myself included, right? That is definitely difficult for me to do, right? Like for any business owner, right? But that should not be the reason why you're choosing to hire somebody, or if you have staff, you should be ready and willing to pay them a reasonable wage, right? So now, the beef here is not with those small business owners, it's with the government, right? So you just saw all of these subsidies and stuff that we just talked about just with this stimulus. They do this all the time. If you look at the big companies or the big oil industry and stuff like that, they always have these subsidies and things. What we need to be doing as a people is fighting for the $15 an hour minimum wage. And then for all of them that want to cite the small businesses not being able to do it, you say no, pay the people what they're worth. And if you need to, subsidize the small businesses so that they can meet the $15 an hour, right? That's what should be happening, right? Right now, they give these tax cuts. Hey, what's up, doggy? Right now, they give these tax cuts, and it's completely backwards. It's completely backwards. Nobody is going to go and hire new people just because at the end of the year the government says that they save some money in taxes, right? What's going to make them hire people is if one day Walmart come in the door and they got 10 people, and the next day it's 50 people. Demand, right? That's why when they gonna hire somebody. But just giving a blind tax cut, saying that that's gonna drive the economy, like that's not how you do it, right? You increase people's wages, right? If you increase people's wages, what they gonna do? People gonna go spend that money in other places. Walmart's gonna have more demand. Walmart's gonna hire more people, right? If small businesses can't pay them, then the government should subsidize those small businesses so that they can pay the $15 an hour minimum wage. Now, for everybody else who's saying like, well, I went to school and I did all of this stuff, and I should be, people working at McDonald's shouldn't be making that amount. Actually, that's helping you out, Because if somebody at McDonald's is making $15 an hour, or somebody at any job, and the base wage is $15, now you have more leverage, and that employer cannot justify paying you any, less than that. They're going to have to increase your wage. So by increasing the minimum wage, we would actually increase the wages across the board for everybody. And the argument is different. We need to, if we say we truly support small businesses, we would say, yes, increase the minimum wage, and then subsidize the small businesses so that they can pay it. Now they can compete with all of these other companies out here, on a more level playing field. So for us, my small businesses out there that is pushing back against this, no, don't push back against this. Support it, support the people in your community, and then and at the same time push the government to subsidize your ability to be able to, because you want to pay your people $15 an hour or more. You would love to do that, and that should be the conversation.
Maybe 2 points from that right there. One person said, well, the business owner has to train that particular employee. That costs money. So what if that employee leaves, say, 6 to 9 months from the time they started employment there? Is that a loss on behalf? I'm sure it's a loss on behalf of the employer, but I mean, is it really a major factor? I mean, is it a major loss for the employee?
I mean that's hiring and training people is one of the and employee turnover is one of the biggest costs that businesses face, right? And a lot of times, what's really driving people to like not stick with jobs? Most of the time, they're not getting a living wage there, and at some point, they just like, I'm fed, and they'll go somewhere else. So this low wages actually hurts businesses even more than I think raising it, because it leads to phenomena like you're talking about, where the employer is constantly hiring and training new people because they can't keep nobody. But yeah, that is a big cost. But at the end of the day, that's a risk that you take as a business owner. People may not stay, so that's just a risk that you would take. But you still gonna get that tax break because you paid those wages to the people. So, at the end of the day, you should the business if wages are an issue for your business, then there are probably other problems that you're already having or experiencing in your business. Like maybe there's something wrong with your sales, or your business needs to grow or something where you can actually afford to have employees or something. Because another thing that I see, businesses don't often charge properly or price properly, right? Like, yours, a portion of your price should be factoring in what it costs you in labor. You know what I mean? So,
Okay.
but yeah, so a lot of times, like there could be, if you can't afford to pay people, then there might be other issues in your business, and it's not necessarily the fact that that the increased minimum wage is tanking your business or whatever. Is that there were probably already issues there? Is what I'm trying to say.
Now, that was one point from the employer perspective. This other point I have here is from the employee perspective. Financial literacy. Okay, we're gonna go to that, to this right here. But before we go to that, my second point is, so the employee, let's say it goes to $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of folks say, well, I can't afford to pay my utilities. I can't afford to pay rent, or I can't afford to pay my car note. I can't afford to pay daycare. $15 an hour will do me just fine. Now, before you get to $15 an hour, it's currently right now at, I believe, $7.25, or is it $8.75?
$8.75 West Virginia.
875 West Virginia. Okay, so think about this. If you're at 875 an hour currently, this moment right now, and you can afford to say you can buy bologna, and now you're jumping up to $15 an hour, okay? Maybe you can afford to buy a steak. Should the consumer or should the employee use some financial common sense to say, okay, I'm making more money now. Should I still spend wisely? You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm saying is, what's going to happen is, I mean, you get a pay raise, so you're driving a Toyota. Now you want to drive a Lexus. So now you're breaking. So now you're breaking even. Then you say, okay, well, hell, I'm making $15 an hour. I'm driving a Lexus. I'm not making enough money. I need now $21 an hour. So,
Yeah,
I mean, this is about financial literacy, right?
yeah, 100%.
Explain it to me. Go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. That there needs to be a constant conversation around financial literacy, especially in our communities, right? And that's not to beat us up, right? All of America is suffering from a lack of financial literacy. Like most Americans can't, no matter what color you are, can withstand a $400 emergency right now. Like that would bankrupt most people right now. And so, the phenomenon you're talking about is the same thing even rich people suffer from, right? That lack of financial literacy. No matter how much money you making, if you're not spending it right, you're going to always end up in some kind of financial trouble. And the problem is, though, with us, with in the black community and lower income people, is we have less leeway to make any mistakes. So whenever we do make mistakes, we get deeper and deeper in the debt and all of that stuff. And like you're saying, the lack of financial literacy may make some people think that, oh, well, I'm making more money now, I can just go do this or that now, and they're not properly telling their money where it should be going before they get it, and properly, like, managing their lifestyle. So so what you're saying is 100% true. But at the end of the day, we can't. The fact we know that people need more to live on. Like, wages right now are not a livable wage, right? Like, the average American has to choose between keeping their lights on or going to the doctor, right? And part of that is a function of the minimum wage. Our bad financial behavior, that's just something we're gonna have to work together to continue educating ourselves. Shows like yours, where we're having this conversation now. Hopefully, somebody listening to this is gonna think, you know what, I am gonna start keeping a monthly budget, right? And I am gonna start figuring out where my money should go before it gets into my hand. And I am going to set a savings plan. And if my minimum wage goes up from $8.75 to $15, then I am going to know ahead of time what I'm going to do with that extra amount of money. And that is just a matter of helping people form better habits and continuing to have this conversation like we're having today. Because a lot of us just simply lack the skills, is the simplest way I can put it.
You have two babies,
Mm-hmm.
the Financial
Great.
Literacy Boot Camp and New Economy Works West Virginia. Talk to me about it.
So the financial literacy boot camp is my way of giving back to the community, right? For all of these years, I've done budgeting for companies, or I've been looking at people's numbers and things within all of these entities. I've got a master's degree, a bachelor's degree in accounting, a professional certification. So, and it was only after all of this education and all of these years doing this for other people that I realized that a lot of the dysfunction I was having in my own life was because I wasn't actually applying good financial literacy skills like keeping a monthly budget or understanding, what emergency funds are, and all of these different things. I wasn't doing it at home, and so that's where I came up with the concept of. I started to think to myself, well, I never had these conversations when I was younger, as I was coming up. I didn't even have these conversations when I was adult. People don't even want to talk about it. And but when I started to see some relief in it, I was talking about it with other people, and I was reading about it, and I was studying it and continuing to master my skills. And I thought, you know what? I know enough now that we should be teaching this to younger people and to adults that are ready to listen. Like now, we shouldn't wait, right? Because this is literally one of the things, like we just talked about in this call in the conversation today, is a lot of us just lack basic financial literacy skills, and then when I teach this stuff, people say, oh, this is common sense. I'm like, you're right, it's common sense, but how often do you put a combination of knowledge in these different areas like budgeting, saving, investing, entrepreneurship, risk management? How often do you put this stuff together in a way to where it's helping you to meet all your financial goals in your life? Most people is like, no, they're either halfway budgeting or not budgeting at all. So it's just like people are like, okay, I can do this, but it starts with having this conversation with people. So that's what the financial literacy bootcamp is, to continuously have this conversation, but go beyond giving people information and actually connecting them to people like myself or other professionals that can help you with financial literacy. Is what the boot camp is about. It's a hub for people to get financial information and to also have some guidance along the way to know that you're not having to deal with all of these financial issues alone. Like there's somebody else here that can have these conversations with you and that can help you. So that's the financial literacy bootcamp. New West Virginia is as a is an effort to build cooperative business enterprises here in West Virginia, specifically right now on Charleston's west side. So it's a national loan fund that specifically lends to minority communities, and they find local individual, people from the local area to vet the projects, and I just happen to be the person vetting the projects here in Charleston, along with others that are on our steering committee, such as Dr. Shaniqua Smith, Katanya Hart, and also Ty Bullock, one of our local business developers here in Charleston. But in order to unlock any funding from New West Virginia, the businesses have to be structured as cooperatives. And I guess I have to give you a little education about what a cooperative is, right? So let me find the.
That's fine. That's fine. Hey, that's fine.
I'm gonna find. I don't want to misquote it, because anybody that's in the co-ops listen to this, they'll beat me if I don't get these right. The 7 co-op principles.
Okay.
So basically, most people when they hear cooperatives, they think farming, agriculture, stuff like that, which is true, right? It's true. Most co-ops do deal with farming or agriculture, but in reality, any business, any business can operate cooperatively or under the 7 international cooperative principles. It's more of a form of governance and who owns and controls the business, and it has less to do with what product or service you sell. Any business can be a cooperative, but so the 7 principles are 1, open and voluntary membership. And number 2 is democratic member control. Number 3, member economic participation. So everybody got to put in, autonomy and independence. So people have a sense of ownership, ownership mindset. And then there's education, training, and information. And then number 6 is cooperation among cooperatives. And my favorite principle is number 7, concern for community. So essentially, we're trying to build businesses that embody and carry out these 7 core principles. And I hope that as people are listening to this, they see those these principles in the work that I do, even down to how I work with you to prepare your taxes, or if I'm doing bookkeeping or any other type of service that I might provide as a CPA. I'm also operating under these 7 principles.
Mavery, here's a question for you right here. As far as financial literacy,
Okay.
you have somebody in this role play right here. You have somebody in the class and they say, well, Mr. Davis, I'm making somewhere between $10 to $12 an hour.
Okay.
How can I get started in creating a financial portfolio of myself and try to have some wealth to where I can have, say, like you mentioned earlier, a $400, say, emergency fund? How can I do that on my salary, on, say, $12 an hour salary? How can I, where do I start?
Okay, that's a really good question. And the first place you start is you change your mindset about how you even think and feel about money, right? You need to, a lot of people think that you have to have money to be able to budget or to be able to save something. In reality, it doesn't matter how much you have, and the less you have, the more that things like putting together a budget is for you. And where you start is you start with what you have to start with. If after you've looked at your income and your outlays, and all you have is $1 to save, you know what? You figure that out and you save that dollar, and you save that dollar consistently every time. And then you continue to budget. And what you'll find is, as you write out where your money is coming from and where your money is going consistently every month, you will start to notice that that dollar is now $2 or $3 that you can save. And now it's $5, or now it's $10. The point is, it's not how much you save, it's the fact that you are saving. And by looking at it and budgeting on a regular and consistent basis, which is the main thing, people often they'll know they need to do this, and so they'll start it. First thing, they get discouraged when they look at where they've been spending their money. They're like, oh man, I spent all that money at Wendy's. I can't do this. And so they quit, right? And they stop. But in reality, it's actually going to take you 3 to 6 months to come up with a good budget for yourself, right? So the point is to write it out, look at it, and then try to tell you before your money comes in. Try to tell it. Do your best to tell it where it should go before you start spending money that month, and then you track against it and you look. And again, if you got that dollar to save, you save that dollar. If it's $5, you save it, and then you come back the next month and you try to do better. And then at some point, this stuff will start to become a habit for you. And every time you get money, you'll save some money. And every time, each month comes up, you'll start to notice that you know where your money is going before the money even hits your bank account. When you can get to that point where you are telling your money what to do instead of your money just freely going out because you're not taking the time to do the very practical step of just writing out where your money's coming from and where it's going on a regular basis. That's really the best place to start. That's the only place to start, because then that's when you will see where you can start saving at, and what your saving plans look like, not what somebody else's looks like.
So
And then you just build from there.
so the psychology is it's all about discipline, correct?
Discipline, yes.
And if you don't have the discipline to do that, it's going to fail, correct?
Yeah, it's gonna fail. But again, a lot of getting that discipline is just trying and doing it. Like, you got to do it, and don't get discouraged when you tried to set a budget for yourself and you missed it. Right? That's not a reason to stop. That's a reason to keep going. Right?
Yeah.
Because and that's what happens to most people. We get discouraged because we're like, oh, I tried to do this and I couldn't do it. Most people don't understand that it actually is going to take you 3 to 6 months to really figure out your spending habits and what you must spend money on and what you don't really need to, and then to discipline yourself into saving everything that you didn't need to spend, right? And that's how you start to be able to build an emergency fund and build these habits to do it on a consistent basis. You have to start somewhere, and then don't get discouraged if you're not an expert the next day or the next month. Like, realize that this is something that is a journey, and it's going to take you some time, and to talk about it with people. Most people are going through very similar things, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. You can always change your financial situation, right? Or you can get stuck in wherever it's at and then never do anything about it, and then it keeps deteriorating. So you have to acknowledge it, and then continue to keep fighting to do things to make it different, make it better.
My parents, God rest their souls, and this is a generational thing, I believe. My parents never finished high school.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents, I would consider them, they probably have a PhD in economics.
Right.
Because they saved, they worked, they saved, and it got to the point where my parents bought a house outright, paid cash.
Mm-hmm.
Any repairs or anything, paid cash. The cars that my dad bought, paid cash. No interest or anything. He paid it outright. He owned it. But we don't, but this generation, I guess, doesn't know how to do that.
We've lost the basics, and that's what I'm saying, man. We've lost the basics, and we need your parents, and we need people like you who have been conditioned that way, right? Who've gone through that, who have seen the benefits, to bring this message, and we got to figure a way to that. That's why I feel like that's part of my, that's part of what I got to put on my back, right? As somebody who's, less than 1% of all CPAs are Black, right? So that means, like, that these financial concepts and all of that stuff is not constantly being talked about in our communities, right? There's not even enough of us that even think this way to, you know what I mean? So that's what I feel like we have to. What your parents were doing was very basic. They knew how much they had coming in, and they knew how much was going out, and they had dreams and goals, and they saved for them. That was part of their budget. Whatever that emergency fund, they had a line item in their budget, and every time your dad got a check, he took some out and he put it there for that house, and he took some out and he put it there for repairs on the house every time. Even though he knew he wasn't getting that house for 10 years from now, 20 years from now, he knew that. And every time he took something out and put it there, that's because back then we for whatever reason we had these basic concepts, but nowadays, technology and everything, we're bombarded with just consume, 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 buy, 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 buy. Nobody ever talks about how to manage what you got. That's just not the way our society is set up right now. And then us as Black folks, we we're suffering from this to a large extent because you know just about every industry, look at Nike. When they wanted to keep their business going, they supported Kaepernick, right? Because they knew we was gonna go out there and
Right.
buy some stuff, right? Now you see the DHL people, they doing Cardi B songs and blah blah blah, because they know we gonna spend our money, and that's okay, that's fine. But I hope that we realize too that we do have that much economic power, and if I'm not telling people don't go and spend your money, or don't feel like you doing something wrong because you wanted to put some nice shoes on your feet, or put some, like, we all deserve nice things, but let's just get a better understanding of how much nice we can have, and how and what we have to do to meet our asset goals, or our investment goals, or our savings goals, like, so that we can have something down the line, so we can have a piece of property to get that capital gain tax break down the line, for our kids. So it's just right, man. We gotta keep having this conversation, so that our generations now pick this up and learn it fast, because we don't have the luxury of time to, like, pick this up, right? We just read all of these statistics about how we are already behind, right? So this is something basic we can learn now, that is
Okay.
going to keep a lot more, just the wealth that we already have access to, keep just manage that a little bit better. If we could do that.
You said earlier about financial literacy. One of the pillars you mentioned was about community. Community. Where does the community come into financial literacy, and what can the community do to get a positive return out of this?
Okay, so where the community comes in terms of financial literacy is, um, uh, encourage your kids to learn about money and finances early, right? Put them in programs
How
like,
early? How
uh,
early?
how early? Well, let's just say that my youngest son is 2, and we're already teaching him budgeting concepts. So it really doesn't matter how young. Just start as young as possible to just have these conversations with kids, and then so so as far as community is concerned, like, have your kids participate in programs that teach uh, about money, or finances, or entrepreneurship, and encourage your kids to do it in groups with other kids. Because these are going to be the people who are their support systems financially, the people who they're going to be able, as they grow up and do business with people, or are saving, or figuring out life events. These are the people who they're going to have to confide in, right? So we need to right now encourage the young people to start having these conversations now, because we want the kids, when they're having these conversations later, to have already been exposed or experienced this stuff now, and not let it be getting their first taste at learning about a loan or a credit card, when they're 18 or 19 or 20 years old. Like, we want to make sure that they've had these conversations early on. And then I would say if you're listening and you're somebody who is in one of these financial areas, you're somebody who, works with a bank, or you're an insurance professional, or you're somebody that works in government, volunteer your time and your service and your knowledge to programs like the Financial Literacy Bootcamp, and expose our young people and their parents to the knowledge that you have, because they likely don't have enough resources to have these conversations on a regular basis. So I would ask the community, people who can speak and provide access to resources in these areas, to participate in community programs and things like that. Yeah.
Now, you know that African Americans are making, as far as the average salary here in West Virginia, well below the median here.
Mm-hmm.
So give me a ballpark estimate. Let's say that an African American male, he makes about, say, $30,000. How much do you think he should be able to retain or save for future future expenses, like just a rainy day fund, emergency fund, or just have some sort of wealth to build? How much should an average person, say, make $30,000? How much do you think they should?
Well, in general, folks should save 10% of their income, right? About 75% of your income should cover your core living expenses, right? And then another 10% should go straight to saving. So what that's 85%. Um, and then you can use the other uh,
Sorry, I
sorry
didn't
about
get
that. The
that.
other 10 or 15% or so to put towards an emergency fund or something like that. But in general, most people should start, or everybody should start saving just generally 10% of their income. Try to keep their living expenses at 75%, and then then use the remaining like 15% to go towards investments or emergency funds or things like that.
Okay. Before I wrap this up, again, you handle you conduct workshops and everything, and your financial literacy workshop and other things. Tell me, how do people, how can they get a hold of you to get involved with, um, to learn financial literacy boot camp, to learn how to be successful, to learn to have some money for future terms? How can they get to you to get involved with this?
Okay, so well, in general, to reach me regarding taxes or business development, or anything regarding New West Virginia, it would be Mavery Davis CPA at gmail.com. Or you can call me at 304-206-1867. For the financial literacy program, you can check us out on Facebook at FLBCWV. Yeah, it's on Facebook at FLBCWV. And then you can email me if you're interested about financial literacy at FLBCWV at gmail.com.
All right. Mr. Davis, thank you very much for this interview. It has been very helpful, very educational, especially for me. Um, I haven't done my taxes yet, so I may have to call on you, you know. So yeah, like I said, I'm gonna have to do something. You know, I haven't done it yet. So, but again, I want to thank you very much. And again, I will be sure to share this information with you. And again, with anybody and everybody that's listening and is watching. And again, thank you very much.
All right. Appreciate you, Ray.
All
Appreciate
right.
the opportunity to be on the show today.
All right.